Greetings. Do without wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Magick Without Tears video. Today we're going to be continuing with Chapter 9, The Secret Chiefs. Let's begin. So a few times in this video, I'll share some personal experiences and opinions I have, which I'm somewhat loath to do as some work is private, just too private, but I think it adds to the video rather than detracts or, creates too much of a distraction. But I will separate my point of views from the main text and the analysis of this text with an outright statement, or, you'll know it's conjecture anytime that I'm sharing something from a first-person perspective. I'm not going to go into other texts later on, so here I'll just briefly mention you should go through the Confessions if you want to read about this subject. Crowley writes about the secret chiefs in great detail at points in the Confessions. He writes in long detail about the feud with Mathers regarding authority bestowed by the secret chiefs, culminating in Iowa's, the secret chief and holy guardian angel of Crowley, announcing a new aeon via the Book of the Law. There's also the Amalantra working and Abul-Di's working. The former, I believe, gave instructions about founding the Abbey of Thelema, and the latter about writing Book 4. Among other instructions that they both gave, but those are like the two main things that those two secret chiefs gave directly to Crowley. Maybe these two workings will be for future videos. Anywho, the chapter begins, quote, Cara Sora, do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. Very glad I am, since at one time I was obliged to be starkly stern about impertinent curiosity, to note that your wish to be informed about the secret chiefs of the AA is justified. It is most certainly of the first importance that you and I should be quite clear in our minds about those under whose jurisdiction and tutelage we both work. End quote. It's often presumed that anyone who has attained a grade above the abyss is on par with the secret chiefs. This is only true to a certain extent. The being working through a body, such as To Megatherion, may be on par, but I'd argue that the human, Aleister Crowley, whose hand is writing these letters and the Book of the Law, most certainly is not. There's a differentiation between the human and this higher authority working through the human. Regardless, world events are being orchestrated by the secret chiefs who, for their own reasons, have taken interest in this planet and the development of our species. Perhaps because we could communicate with them. Perhaps because they oversee the evolution of the entire universe of which we are a part. Regardless, let's explore what they are. Quote, the question is beset with thickets of tough thorn. What is worse, the path is so slippery that nothing is easier than to tumble headfirst into the spikiest bush of them all. You justly remind me that one of my earliest slogans was, Mystery is the enemy of truth. How then is it would I acquiesce in the policy of concealment in a matter so cardinal? Perhaps the best plan is for me to set down the facts of the case so far as possible. From them it may appear that no alternative policy is feasible. The first condition of membership of the AA is that one is sworn to identify one's own great work with that of the raising mankind to higher levels, spiritually and in every other way. Accordingly, it stands to reason that those charged with the conduct of the order should be at least masters of the temple, or their judgment would be worthless, and at least magi, though not that particular kind of magus who brings the word of a new formula to the world every 2,000 years or so, or they would be unable to influence events on any scale commensurate with the scope of the work. End quote. So real quick, let's mention this point about the magus. In 2,000 years or so, Crowley is talking about, I assume, the formula of the Aeon Abrahadabra. The formula of Osiris was most likely that of the dying and reborn god, though INRI didn't come about until much later, and there is no overarching word that the previous Magi of AA all fell under that we are aware of. They each had their own words, which you can read short little blurbs about in Liber Aleph, and they lived or were mythologized about only several hundred years apart from one another. Today, an initiate can attain ninth degree equals 2 square in AA by two methods. One, they can utter their own logos, which must conform to the word of the Aeon, Abrahadabra. Or two, they specially dedicate themselves to the logos of their Aeon, Thelema. And I think what Crowley is insinuating, so AA is in service to mankind. Thus, the secret chiefs operate in the same Rosicrucian manner, in service to AA, in service to mankind. So, it's an important little key fact about their nature and what their property is, how they operate. To continue with the secret chiefs, quote, "Of what nature is this power, this authority, this understanding, this wisdom? Will? I go up from Gibora to Chakma. Of the passive side, it is comparatively easy to form some idea, for the qualities essential are mainly extensions of those that all of us possess in some degree, and whether understanding-wisdom is right or wrong must be largely a matter of opinion, oftentimes only can decide such points. Oftentimes can only decide such points. But for the active side, it is necessary to postulate the existence of a form of energy at their disposal which is able, quote, to cause change to occur in conformity with the will, end quote, one definition of magic. Now this, as you know, is an exceedingly complex subject. Its theory is tortuous, and its practice encompassed with every kind of difficulty. Is there no simple method? Yes. The thaumaturgic engine disposes of a type of energy more adaptable than electricity itself, and both stronger and subtler than this. Its analogy in the world of profane science. One might say that it is electrical, or at least one of the elements in the ring formula of modern mathematical physics." End quote. So let's pause here. It's easier to understand the feminine side of the tree because we all possess some degree of the qualities of these spheres. Absolutely. Even the intellectual part of the soul can get a gleaming of Binah through the abyss. In practice, this is that little intuitive voice that once in a while speaks up and guides us. That Jiminy Cricket, you might call it. But it is really that upper point of the hexagram, which is attributed to Saturn, poking up into the abyss and getting a dribble of intuition from Binah. The intuitive part of the soul, the Neshama. It seems Crowley is stating that the secret chiefs are on par with Chakma. Regardless, everything above the abyss is in perfect union. Thus the Magister Templari and the Magus. There's a bigger connection between those two things than, say, with the Philosophus and the Adeptus Minor. The secret chief's function is to guide humanity, perhaps the destiny of the universe. Then the thought that I have is they act as the logos of the divine light, just as the Magus, just as the Magister Templari, each guide humanity in their own ways. I have used the analogy of electricity myself when it comes to occult science, and I think it's worth a short detour to tangent upon. Occultism is first and foremost a science. It offers a scientific understanding of the human condition and the nature of the universe. While we cannot see the source, we can see the direct result of the source in the here and now, and by observing the lower, we gain insight into the higher. With that, if you look at any of the physical sciences and compare their theories, formulas, and observations to those of the greatest occultists, you will see they are always identifiable, albeit the physical sciences are always a step behind. What they end up discovering are things that occultists have always known. The benefits of physical sciences mostly lie in medicine, technology, and biology. On the observation of electricity. Electricity still is not fully understood by the physical sciences. They can label functions and properties, manipulate it, but they don't actually know what it is. Relying on an occult perspective, let me share my meditation. It is a fluid source of light and heat, a key component to life, and pure energy in a charged form. Different by far than the sun, but very much like the sun, as it has both heat and light. It has the power to magnetize. which is a key component in such ideas that have to do with opposites, negative and positive. The astral light, though intangible, is much like electricity, as it is in energy, fluid, and charged with energy. You might look at electricity and see it as a perfect analogy for the astral light, which of itself is a lower form of what we call in Tefereth solar light. And these are both lower manifestations of the highest light, that invisible light. So at the highest, we have a light of both, thus neither, positive and negative. The solar light of Tefereth, which is predominantly positive, and astral light of Yesod, which is predominantly negative. In Malkuth, if it is safe to look at electricity as a physical world manifestation, a light energy which has both negative and positive charges. If I were a betting person, I'd wager that electricity could be placed in Kether, which itself is in Malkuth, as well as Tefereth and Yesod if you were to place it in the magician's tables, essentially along the middle pillar. We can then look at the lightning strike on the tree, thunder gods, the Kundalini, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, and see various manifestations and interactions of electricity as symbolic of various points of nature in the universe and in the human body and mind. Relating now to the secret chiefs, does not the logo symbolize the exact function I described by analyzing electricity from an occult perspective? This light is transmitted into sound, heat, word, in Chakma, and that light, heat, word is transmitted down through the tree of life. To continue with the chapter about authority and will, quote, in the RR at AC, this is indicated to the adept minor by the title conferred upon him on his initiation to that grade, Hodos Chameleonis, the path of the chameleon. This emphasizes the omnivalence of the force. In the higher degrees of the OTO, the AA is not fond of terms like this, which verge on the picturesque. It is usually called the Ophidian vibrations, thus laying special stress upon its serpentine strength, subtlety, its control of life and death, and its power to insinuate itself into any desired set of circumstances. End quote. Omnivalence, a state of infinite possibilities, or being all-powerful. Ophidian vibration is a term used to describe the ability of snakes to detect and interpret vibrations, used for predator avoidance and prey detection by serpents. For the magician, it refers to the serpent force, the term often employed when speaking about the Kundalini, but it is of a more broad sense. Crowley is speaking about something inside and outside of the magician, a binding magical force, a vibration or thing which the magician, once attuned, can use to determine in which ways to direct their will and sense forthcoming events. Serpentine is especially poignant as the snake is the symbol of Scorpio, the death card, which symbolizes change and infinite adaptability. Continued quote, it is of this universally powerful weapon that the secret chiefs must be supposed to possess complete control. They can induce a girl to embroider a tapestry, or initiate a political movement to culminate in a world war, all in pursuit of some plan wholly beyond the purview or the comprehension of the deepest and subtlest thinkers. It should go without saying that the adroit use of these vibrations enables one to perform all classical miracles. End quote. Shortly, at the end of the chapter, Crowley goes into a subject about his observations of the secret chiefs, giving more examples of what they can do, which I am excited to get to. Here, though, I will share my own observation, which also excites me and is confirmed later in the chapter. I've had several experiences where, going about my great work, you meet someone you don't know and they say or do something which seems so uncanny and pertinent to you and to what you are going through, or something which suddenly sparks a fire in you and gives you renewed vigor. It can be a simple sentence in passing, a seed for your unconscious, or a very direct and overt statement meant for your conscious mind. Or it could be an action which pushes you. One example, and I got permission, was something that I observed with my fiancé. He has a tattoo on his wrist, Conks on Pax, just like the cover of the book. And he was commuting and a random person walked over and asked him about the tattoo and said, "What is that? Do you mind if I ask?" And it seemed like the guy was kind of very polite and just inquiring. So my fiance responded, "It's a prayer. It means light and extension," which he said, not trying to over-explain to a stranger, but also be open, as the person didn't give off any bad vibes. He seemed relatively harmless and just genuinely intrigued by the tattoo. Well, upon hearing light and extension, the guy immediately responded, "In order to extend light, you have to know the light," or something to that effect. This was years ago now, and I don't recall the exact phrasing. Then the stranger walked away. So it's almost like something in his consciousness just shifted, and it was like a channeled message, you know? I myself have had a share of experiences I see as directly influenced by the secret chiefs. When I found Thelema, it was at one of the lowest points in my early adult life. And without rehashing the details, I firmly hold either the secret chiefs or my HGA or both conspired to put the person on my path that not only told me everything I needed to know about how to get started on my thelemic path, but I was also in my personal life finally at the point I knew I was going to transition, and in the most unlikely of all places, they were able to provide me with stacks and stacks of information about everything I needed to know about how to transition. Articles by trans people, medical opinions, what the hormonal and surgical aspects were like, psychological reviews, and a host of other vital information. I can say the same thing about how my teacher came and went in my life. I asked a question, this person was compelled to answer, and then some time went by, we worked together very rigorously, and they literally passed away on the morning of my birthday at August 30th, 2016. There's just some things that are just so uncanny that it's like, how is that coincidental, So I have a slew of other examples, but I will here share one unincarnated entity I hold to be a secret chief that I had communications with. In 2018, I had months prior to begin the arrangements for a 12-day magical retreat. I was postponing for any number of excuses, really. My tardiness left me feeling a bit dry after a while. But I wasn't also being completely honest with myself about why I felt so dry at that time. So I sat down. I recall exactly what I did. I ignited Kether with light, and in my mind's eye, focused that light as a radio antenna to make a connection to a guiding force. Within moments, I was connected to a spirit who called itself Arakarth. You'll see on your screen a little sketch I did when that happened. It was that afternoon. I went through the usual testing of an unknown entity, and once convinced, I asked what was it that I should be doing at that phase of my work. And immediately, it reminded me of the idea I had put off months prior about undergoing a magical retirement, with the strict, command to begin writing out the rituals for that 12-day retreat immediately, and then set a date and begin. Stop postponing. Start it now. So with renewed vigor, I complied, and, it was a very pivotal success in my path. I grew a lot from that experience. So I have other things, seen entities on the physical plane quite a few times at this point. But yeah, let's continue with the chapter. Quote, "These powers are stupendous. They seem almost beyond imagination to conceive. Hic ego nec metas rerum nec tempora pono imperium sine fine dedi. Here I set neither limits nor times for things. I have given you control without end. As Virgil, that mighty seer and magician of Rome, says in his first book of the Aeneid. These powers move in dimensions of time and space quite other than those of which we are familiar. Their values are incomprehensible to us. To a secret chief wielding this weapon, the nice conduct of a clouded cane might be infinitely more important than a war, famine, and pestilence, such as might exterminate a third part of the race to promote whose welfare is the crux of his oath and the sole reason of his existence." End quote. Note, the secret chiefs are incomprehensible to us. Whatever their end plans of their actions, we're not going to be able to intellectually calculate or understand that. And though their methods may seem cruel or arbitrary to us, at hearing things such as igniting the barbarism of the human race against itself, I do not think they care much for the ideas of what we consider good or evil. It is all just necessary to the grand architect and the direction that the universe needs to go in. Whenever I read this chapter, I think right away of the Greek gods in Olympus. The mythologies written down about them, which outline the plots, schemes, and devices of the gods for purposes far beyond the human to even write about. And of course, these myths were written by humans, so they often give them a petty purpose for doing something. But I'd argue a better interpretation, rather than what is recorded in the mythologies, is all these plots and devices that kind of fill in why the gods do things are failings of the human hands, writing about nature and the very topics we breach in this chapter. What is nature, this ever-changing maelstrom? What will it turn into, and why? These are things we can't comprehend, so they've been personified. They're various deities over the years and worked with and worshipped and etc. And not to say that I don't hold that entities exist in their own right, but it's just that mythologies are sometimes corrupted by the human hand, is what I'm saying. We can't really understand why certain things do things. We can't even understand everything in the physical world, let alone something that you can't intellectualize, period. Quote, "But who are they? Since they are invisible and inaccessible, may they not merely be figments invented by a self-styled master, not quite sure of himself, to prop his tottering authority? Well, the invisible and inaccessible criticism may equally be leveled at Captain A and Admiral B of the Naval Intelligence Department. These secret chiefs keep in the dark precisely for the same reasons, and their qualities disappear instantaneously the moment they want to get a hold of you. It is written, moreover, 'Let my servants be few in secret, they shall rule the many in the known.' Liber L, chapter 1, verse 10. But are they men in the usual sense of the word? They may be incarnate or discarnate. It is a matter of their inconvenience." End quote. I'm stopping here mid-paragraph to share a key point I hold about the secret chiefs. I hold that they can in fact manifest physically. They can pop into a person's consciousness and operate through the person without said person ever noticing that their being has been hijacked temporarily. They'll think that they're taking those actions, meanwhile they were compelled. I hold that the secret chiefs can then do things on the physical plane as they please. I also hold that they can in fact incarnate for an entire lifetime, taking a human vessel and living that lifetime doing what they need to do. Now, for the latter, I would think constrains them to the ignorance of the human being who starts from birth with a clear slate of memory. Unconsciously, they will be drawn to their work and will most likely be guided and pushed by their kindred towards certain ends, until they come to realize their nature and embrace their work directly. I suggest reading the novel Stranger in a Strange Land one day, as it touches on exactly this concept. Onward, quote, "Have they attained their position by passing through all the grades of the AA? Yes and no. The system which was given to me to put forward is only one of many. Above the abyss, all these technical wrinkles are ironed out. One man who I suspect of being a secret chief has hardly any acquaintance with the technique of our system at all. That he accepts the Book of the Law is almost his only link with my work. That and his use of Ophidian vibrations. I don't know which of us is better at it, but I am sure that he must be a very long way ahead of me if he is one of them." End quote. Crowley here is presumably talking about Samuel Iowa's Jacobs. So, about Jacobs. Of Assyrian descent, born in Iran in 1890, Jacobs was a typesetter and had communications with Crowley. It was Jacobs who gave Crowley the enumeration of Iowas as 93, and To Megatherion as 666 by Gematria. Crowley wondered at the irony of Iowas being the man's middle name, and a seeming intuition about Crowley's great work which the man possessed. Jacobs lived until 1971 when he passed away in Yonkers, New York, so at the time of the writing of Chapter 9, the letters to Mackie, Jacobs would have been in his early 50s when Crowley wrote about him in this chapter we're now analyzing. Quote, You have already in these pages and elsewhere in my writings examples numerous and varied of the way in which they work. The list is far from complete. The matters of Abul-Diz and of Amalantra show one method of communication. Then there is the way of direct inspiration, as in the case of Hermes E. Mai in New Orleans. Again, they may send an ordinary living man, whether one of themselves or no, I cannot feel sure, to instruct me in some task, or to set me right when I have erred. Then, there have been messages conveyed by natural objects, animate or inanimate. Needless to say, the outstanding example in my life is the whole plan of campaign concerning the Book of the Law. But is Aiwaz a man, presumably a Persian or Assyrian, and a secret chief, or is he an angel in the sense that Gabriel is an angel? End quote. Again, read the novel Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm skipping over where Hermes Mi, which was a sort of name, I forget exactly what it enumerates to in Greek. You could look up the Greek gematria on that, it'll give you a better insight into that. Another example I think is interesting to consider. I have a video on Crowley attaining the grade of Magus, 9th degree equals 2 square. So if you read, Liber 73, the Urn, he talks about the masked ones, my servants, and so his he went through a series of sex partners, ending with Leah Hersig, which he identified with the ape of Thoth. So it was these, various sexual partners that each came in nearly 73 day cycles. Things were happening in his life, and so he was able to see, it's the third Hakma day. But anyway, the point is, it could be considered that these people, what was operating through them was, a masked one, my servant. So it was a secret chief during that time that he was with them, working through them, pushing them into that situation. As far as Iowa's Jacobs, and the concept of the secret chiefs, or whether they're incarnate, I think it's more likely that the secret chiefs compelled Jacob's parents to give him that middle name Iowa's and then pushed him towards certain events which eventually led him to Crowley. But it could very well be possible Crowley's holy guardian angel incarnated as Jacob's, though Jacobs would have been ignorant of his true nature. Perhaps the secret chief operated several times out of body to interact with Crowley directly, such as, the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law. That's possible. There's no answer to this. It's all speculation. I'm just laying out a couple of possibilities, a couple of thought experiments to try to understand the nature of these entities, and, we could grapple with it to a certain extent. I think it's important. Quote, is Abul-Diz an adept who can project himself into the aura of some woman with whom I happen to be living, although she has no previous experience of the kind or any interest in such matters at all? Or is he a being whose existence is altogether beyond this plane, only adopting human appearance and faculties in order to make himself sensible and intelligible to that woman? I have never attempted to pursue any such inquiry. You ask whether contact once made, I am able to renew it should I so wish. Again, yes and no. But the real answer is that no such gesture on my part can ever be necessary. For one thing, the chief is so far above me that I can rely on him to take the necessary steps whenever contact would be useful. Elsewhere, I will explain why they picked out so woe-begone a ragamuffin as myself to proclaim the word of the Aeon, and do all the chores appertinent to that particular work. The burden is heavier as the years go by, but perdurable, end quote. I have many opinions about why Crowley, not the least of which is because he was able to be a clown and catty as a human, yet fully dedicated to the great work. His vices scare off anyone not able to look past them and separate the art from the artist, so to speak. So it's almost like Crowley's personality filters out who should not be doing this work, which I think is an interesting way to look at why Crowley. And finally, here are a few points in a postscriptum. Quote, P.S. Reading this typescript over for literals, it struck me that you would ask very reasonably, but if the secret masters have these boundless powers, why do they allow you to be plagued by printers, held up for lack of secretaries, worried by all sorts of practical problems? Why, in a word, does anything ever go wrong? There are several lines of reply coalescing, they suffice. And there's several points, but I'm just going to go into point 1 and the end of point 3. So point 1, what is wrong? Since 4 wars is their idea of right, you may well act by what standard you may judge events, end quote. So that line of questioning is human. Things are happening all over the universe right now, and it is not possible for a human to know every detail, everywhere, at any moment. Further, the idea of good and evil are inherently wrong. There is only one course as a star. Know your path and follow it. Discern only what is right or wrong for your will, and do the best you can against extenuating circumstances. Why things happen doesn't really matter. They happen, and we deal with them. So here I'm going to skip points 2 and half of point 3, which reiterate what I just said in a different way, and continue with the postscriptum. Quote, more largely, one cannot judge how a plan is progressing when one has no precise idea what it is. A soldier is told to attack. He may be intended to win through, to cover a general retreat, or to gain time by deliberate sacrifice. Only the commander-in-chief knows what the order means or why he issues it. And even he does not know the issue from his authority, or whether it will display and justify his military skill and judgment. Our business is solely to obey orders. Our responsibility ends when we have satisfied ourselves that they emanate from a source which has the right to command. End quote. Thus, every entity is tested rigorously, and we must use critical thinking and utmost scrutiny, attempting to disprove a philosophy before buying into it. The chapter finally ends with a little flourish of Crowley's peacock tail. Quote, postscriptum. A visitor's story has just reminded me of the possibility that I am a secret chief myself without knowing it, for I have sometimes been recognized by other people as having acted as such, though I was not aware of the fact at the time. End quote. Hence, Tomegatherion and Aleister Crowley, 2 distinct entities, the former working through the latter. Love is the law, love under will. I'll post a link. The Limapedia, which I use for quick bibliography sometimes, was down the other day, but it's back up. So they have a quick blurb about the secret chiefs and the history of that term. So if you want to just see like some quick spark notes on that. Also on Wikipedia, there's some spark notes about the secret chiefs, and it doesn't go into too much detail, but there's some ideas in Theosophy and a couple of other orders which lineate the usage of the term secret masters from, 100 or so years ago up until present day. So with that, I'll catch you on the next one.